Hey, it's your guy Tyrrell back with the interviews. In today's video, we're going to briefly analyze Pep Guardiola's tactical setup in Man City's 2-0 win over Crystal Palace. When we break down the game and we do look at the board, we witness Crystal Palace in a 4-5-1 and Man City starting in a 4-4-2 that could often shift into more of a 4-2-4. So first we're going to break down City's overall attacking shape in their build-up, and then we'll focus on what key areas they were able to exploit beyond this Crystal Palace backline. So if we quickly look back to the base shape of both sides, Crystal Palace should have had Benteke dealing with both of the center backs, have the shuttlers dealing with Fernandinho and Rodri, and then Milivojevic dealing with Gabriel Jesus or Aguero dropping off deeper. That leaves Zaha and Townsend against the wide fullbacks, and then Mitchell and Ward against Sterling and Torres. If you focus strictly on the base shape, you witness some issues that Crystal Palace could encounter. Would Zaha be able to deal with Cancelo bombing forward? Would he track those runs? And then when you look to Benteke, you have a 2v1 with Ake and Laporte able to play positive passes into that midfield zone. When City were in possession, they shifted into more of a 3-1-2-4, and at times it did look like a 3-1-6. What they ended up doing was that they had Fernandinho dropping off into the inside right position to form a back three, and he was basically operating as a right center back when City had possession. That saw Laporte shift out to a left center back role and Ake in the middle. Cancelo and Mendy were encouraged to push forward higher up the pitch, opposed to having Cancelo tucking into a central midfield zone, and that would encourage Torres to hug the touchline. Guardiola wanted his fullbacks to push higher up the pitch to peg back Zaha and Townsend, so we had Fernandinho and Laporte occupying those spaces in behind them in case Crystal Palace were able to win the ball and break on the counter. So with the fullbacks pushing into advanced position, you could see that City are attacking with 6 players. Torres and Sterling do tuck in narrow to occupy the fullbacks, and now you could see all of Crystal Palace's backline occupied. So if Zaha and Townsend don't track back, then Cancelo and Mendy are able to push forward to create overloads. However, we did see variations in the movement of those wide players. For instance, Sterling was often dropping off into the Riedewald-Townsend gap to try and get on the ball, and at times he dropped off deeper ahead of the midfield bank, but he didn't really affect the game in that area. What was interesting about Torres on the opposite side was that he wasn't often looking to occupy Mitchell as Gabriel Jesus was shifting into that zone. At times you would see Sterling tucking in central with Aguero, and then that would leave Mendy to run at Ward if Townsend wasn't tracking back. There were times where Torres did look to drop in between Zaha and Eze, but for the most part he was playing on the outside of Mitchell with Gabriel Jesus occupying the left back. Here you could see Laporte stepping towards the halfway line to drag out Riedewald, but look at the City attacking line. You have Sterling dropping off Ward into that Riedewald-Townsend gap, Aguero dropping off Kouyaté into the Milivojevic-Riedewald gap, and then you have Jesus occupying Mitchell, with Ferran Torres looking to make a run in beyond the left back, and Cancelo beginning to push beyond Zaha. Therefore, now when you look at City's shape, you could see they have a 3v1 advantage at the back, as Benteke was looking to sit to close down Rodri to ensure that he couldn't get on the ball. Meanwhile, in terms of Rodri, if Benteke couldn't stick tight towards him to apply pressure, the only other option for Palace would be to have Milivojevic step forward to apply pressure with hopes that he could disrupt Rodri from playing positive forward passes. Here you could see Laporte looking to shift the ball to Rodri, with Aguero dropping ahead of the midfield bank, Sterling in a pocket of space ahead of Kouyaté, and then look at the right hand side. You have Gabriel Jesus occupying Mitchell, and then Ferran Torres looking to run beyond Mitchell, and Cancelo looking to run beyond Zaha. But when Rodri gets the ball, Milivojevic steps towards him, and he slides it out to Fernandinho. And when you look at the issues that City were able to cause Crystal Palace, it initially started with Fernandinho and Laporte stepping forward. So while City's front 6 occupied Palace's backline, they struggled to cope with Fernandinho, Laporte, and Rodri. What we ended up seeing was that Fernandinho and Laporte were pushing forward freely with the ball until the halfway line, but at that moment, Palace were uncertain how to deal with their threat. because if we focus on the left side initially, with Sterling tucking in narrow that often drags out Ward, and with Laporte stepping forward, you either need Riedewald or Townsend to step towards him. What we ended up seeing was that he was able to slide the ball across Townsend into the path of Mendy, and then with Aguero and Sterling dropping off deeper in between the lines to drag out the center backs, what happened there was that Mendy was able to fizz the ball between the wide players or the shuttler and Ward to place Aguero or Sterling in a position to run at the center backs. If Laporte didn't slide the ball out to Mendy, there was a time where he did look to play the ball over the top for Sterling breaking beyond Ward, and if that wasn't the case, he was often looking to shift the ball over to the right hand side for Torres or Cancelo. Palace encountered more issues down that right side because with Fernandinho stepping forward, Zaha was uncertain whether to step forward to the midfielder. If he steps forward to Fernandinho, that leaves Cancelo free, and with Gabriel Jesus occupying Mitchell, it also leaves Torres free. The proper way for Palace to deal with this threat would be to have Zaha stepping towards Cancelo, and then having Eze push forward to deal with Fernandinho. Obviously, you are worried of the Cancelo-Zaha threat, so what you need to happen here is that you could have Zaha pushing to Fernandinho, and then have Eze shift across to deal with Cancelo, or have him drop off a bit deeper into a narrow position in the half space to deal with Torres, and then have Mitchell pushing forward to deal with Cancelo. However, with Aguero and Sterling looking to drop off into pockets of space in that midfield zone, the Palace midfield bank opted to hold their position to decrease those lines in between their teammates, and that ultimately left a lot of space down the right-hand side because with Zaha focused on Fernandinho, Cancelo was able to push forward freely, and with Jesus occupying Mitchell, that also allowed Torres space to break in behind as Cancelo pushed forward down the touchline. In the second half, you witnessed Fernandinho carrying the ball into Crystal Palace's half, with Riedewald not stepping to apply pressure. You have Sterling in between that Riedewald-Townsend gap. But when you look at the back line, you have Gabriel Jesus making a run between Mitchell and Dan, and neither are tracking that movement. And then you could see Ferran Torres running off the left back unmarked, and Zaha not tracking the movement of Cancelo breaking in behind. That results in Ferran Torres bringing down the ball in the 6-yard box, and from here he should be playing the ball across goal for Gabriel Jesus, but when he attempts to play in his teammate for a tap-in, Dan makes a last-ditch clearance. Shortly after that, it's Rodri sliding the ball across Townsend for Mendy on the left touchline, and you could see Gabriel Jesus occupying Ward, Sterling ahead of Kouyaté, and Aguero positioned ahead of Mitchell. Townsend shifts over towards the touchline when Mendy receives the ball, and this time it's Gabriel Jesus between the lines ahead of Ward as the left back's sole passing option. When Gabriel Jesus receives Mendy's pass around Townsend, you could see Ward and Kouyaté getting dragged towards the ball, and that creates a gap for Sterling to dart into across Dan. That ultimately leads to Gabriel Jesus placing Sterling in a 1v1 position with Dan, and while he would prefer to cut back onto his shooting foot, a quick shift of pace towards the byline could place the attacker free on goal. When Sterling sprints beyond Dan into left half space, he beats the keeper from this position, but his effort strikes off the post. Shortly after that, you could see Rodri on the ball ahead of the Palace midfield bank with no pressure applied, as he prepares to switch the ball in the direction of Torres running off Mitchell and Cancelo making a run off Zaha. However, the City midfielder switch of play falls short once again to Cancelo, with Zaha tracking back well, and you could also see Mitchell tracking Torres' run into right half space. This forces Cancelo to play the ball back to Fernandinho, but Fernandinho drops the ball back to Cancelo, and he's closed now by Zaha and Eze, while Torres checks into the ball to drag Mitchell away from the 6-yard box. As Cancelo steps forward, you could see Eze and Zaha focused on the ball and looking to apply pressure, while Torres spins across Mitchell. What's important to highlight here is the remaining Man City attackers are occupying the Palace backline. However, while Cancelo is able to scoop the ball over Eze, Zaha, and Mitchell, from this position, neither Jesus, Sterling, or Mendy could run onto Ferran Torres' first-time effort through the 6-yard box. And even when we focus on City's winner, when Mendy receives the ball, Townsend's job now is to track back to prevent the left back from playing his teammates in between the lines. But what you end up seeing here is that the runs of Jesus and Sterling do take away the center backs and Ward, and Milivojevic isn't close to Aguero. That ultimately results in Mendy fizzing the ball across Townsend, Eze, and Milivojevic for Aguero, and he controls the ball with his right foot, but as you can see, both center backs are within close proximity, and it's up to Aguero to get a second touch into a shooting position. Luckily for Guardiola, Aguero was able to do that, and with neither Dan or Kouyaté able to apply pressure, Aguero was able to kill off the game. So as you can see, Guardiola's tactical plan created several issues for Palace. By shifting to more of a 3-1-6, they were able to occupy Palace's backline to create overloads out in wide areas and maximize the creative threat of their defenders to create high quality chances. Hi everybody, thanks for watching, and subscribe here for your latest tactical analysis and daily commentary on the Interview show. And if that wasn't enough, don't forget you could find more organic, unfiltered soccer/football analysis on the Interviews podcast, the best soccer/football podcast in the world, available on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and any Android apps on your Android devices.